Hi, Daryl Barrs, continuing Liquid Lunch in place of Hugh Riley, and I have the pleasure here of having Gabriela Rodas with me today.
Yes. Yes. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone.
Yes, and you're working with MCIS Languages.
Yes.
Tell
So,
us about that.
yeah. So we're MCIS Language Solutions. We're a nonprofit organization providing interpretation, translation, and training services in multilingual languages. We were founded in 1989, and we were started out in the public sector mostly. We were a funded organization, but we slowly expanded and grown, and now we also have private sector clients, and it's really how we're able to provide a lot of the services. Yeah.
Okay, so what services, for instance, in the 20 years since it first began,
Yeah.
Toronto has completely changed linguistically, where some of the main languages spoken are Mandarin, Urdu, etc.
Yeah.
So where does your organization fit in with all this? What are you trying to
Yeah.
accomplish? Yeah.
So we really like to see ourselves as kind of like a broker between, for example, what we call the service provider. So it could be a nurse or a doctor, lawyer, and the non-English speaking person. So the person who can't access the critical services, for example, in the city because they don't have the command of the English or French language.
Right.
So that's really what we do, and we first started off with mainly interpretation services.
Like court interpreters at court, for instance?
Well, it's
or-
mostly community interpretation what
Okay.
we do. What the core of the business is community interpretation. So going on to provide services interpretation with, for example, Toronto Public Health or legal aid, things. I guess those kind of settings are what we really specialize in. And then over the years, because usually what we see is interpretation comes as like the first wave of demand when we see an influx of migrants and immigrants, but then it starts to trickle down to translation. So just to differentiate between interpretation and translation, interpretation is really the verbal interpretation, and translation is the interpretation of written documents. So you're doing from one document to another.
Right.
So we started seeing that demand, and then we slowly started growing that department, and also we began training interpreters, so community interpreters, in the 90s, I believe.
Right.
So that's really what we do, and the most important thing is that we're very focused towards, giving back to the community and our social impact. So that's what I believe differentiates us from other language providers.
So how many people are in this organization translating?
So when I started about 7 years ago, there was like maybe 20 people.
Right.
Now we're about 60.
Oh, wow.
So
So is it like a big office building, or what
well,
is it?
we're actually right across the street from the Science Center, which is
Oh,
great.
right.
But no, we've expanded to about 60 staff. So we have an awesome interpretation services department who coordinates all of those requests that come in over the phone, especially. A translation services department that handles all the translation requests. My department, the training department, who trains the community interpreters, and most recently translators, which I would love to get into
Yeah.
a little bit later on. And then we have, all the people who make it possible.
Right.
So HR, everybody else, finance, yeah.
And who's funding all this?
So we are partially funded by several ministries, and we also have some public sector clients and private sector clients.
Right. Okay. And does do any of the public sector clients actually pay, or is it all government
Yes.
sourced?
So that's the common misconception about nonprofit organizations,
Right.
that we're either providing free services all the time, or that we don't pay our
Right.
our freelancers, the people that we work with. But no, we do. So usually we go through the proposal process just as other companies do, and then we just provide, bid for the services that we want to provide.
Okay. And so let's say a full-time or part-time, let's say a part-time translator who would work for you. So one thing that is not used is French. French is not
Well,
one of the
French
languages you're
is
using?
one of the top languages because it is one of the official languages.
So you are working in French
Yes,
too?
yes.
Okay. So if you had someone, let's say, who was capable in English, French, and Spanish, for instance, working part-time for you, what would they do, for instance, on an average day or a week? Yeah.
Well, it depends. If they're working for us as an interpreter, they can have multiple assignments within the day span. Or if they're a translator, usually they work from home. Currently, we have 2 in-house French translators, and this, I guess, can tell you a little bit about the volume of French translations that we get.
Right.
But if you're a freelance translator at home, you can be working whenever you want. But we do mainly work with freelancers, so I guess individual people who are in the city. Yeah.
And are you always looking for new people to
Yeah.
work with?
Yeah, definitely. We have, I guess, an ongoing recruitment process, but usually the demand for specific languages is driven by, for example, the client's need, or if we see an influx of, a cultural group immigrating. For example, I guess the Syrian refugees that we had as an example. So we had to really amp up the recruitment of, I guess, Arabic interpreters and translators. Yeah.
Okay. And you said you were involved in the training, especially.
Yes. So I really want to talk about that because it's I guess, a passion project for myself. Well, I'll give you a little bit of background, but
Sure.
when I first started off at MCIS, I was with the translation department. So this is about 7 years ago or so.
Right.
And we also, at that time, we were training community interpreters, but not translators. And we started receiving requests, why aren't you training translators? What's going on? And we also started seeing a trend of not being able to fulfill certain requests by our clients.
Such as?
For certain languages. For example, Herero, that's one language.
Which is Herero is spoken by, sorry.
I can't recall now, but it just sticks out in my mind because it was a particularly difficult project
I hadn't
to
even heard of that one.
fulfill,
Okay.
right? But we've started seeing that we had to either decline or really figure out who was going to carry out the translation services,
Right.
because we saw a shortage of people who were trained as translators, or we saw people who had the skills or the bilingual skills to become translators, but no means to train as translators. And the reason for this is that, so we did a bit of research and we came across that there's no translator training programs in Ontario if you want to work in languages outside of Spanish, French, and English.
Right.
So this definitely becomes a problem because we're serving like a multicultural and very diverse city, and many of these languages wouldn't be able to be represented if there was no
Right.
translators.
Right.
And a lot of people going without access to critical information and critical services. So that became a big problem.
Right.
Um,
So how have you dealt with that
So,
problem?
unfortunately, like back then, we didn't have the capacity. As I mentioned, we were a super small organization, and nor the funding. So what our excellent, I guess, management team did was set out to look for particular grants that would support that vision of bringing about a translator training program.
Right.
And I believe it was in 2016, we received the wonderful news from the Ontario Trillium Foundation that MCIS had been awarded a grant.
Nice.
So this was, I guess, 4 or 5 years of even thinking that this wasn't even possible. So for me, the only way that I can describe it is as a complete, I guess, dream come true to be working on this project. So the translator training program, it has a dual purpose. Not only does it allow non-English speakers in what I like to call the non-official languages have access to translated material in their language. And for example, the top languages in the city are Punjabi, Tamil, Arabic, Chinese.
Mandarin, Urdu.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we were gonna, by training these people, then we would be giving them access to this material, and also it would allow those who were not able to access training and therefore not able to, perhaps if they wanted to start their own business as a freelance translator, give them that opportunity to be trained and to do that.
Nice. So, and you're doing that hands-on. That's what you're doing right now?
Yes, so I'm doing that. I live, eat, sleep, breathe, everything,
Translation.
translator training.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So,
So how many people are you working with right now in training?
So in my department, I think we're about 6 of us, and particularly on the translator training program, we've had about 4 or 5 staff members, contractors, and then a huge team of subcontractors that have been helping us develop the program.
Okay, so you're actually developing the whole program on how to do this?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, so we actually launched the on-site program in March of 2017.
Right.
So it took us about a year to really put together all the content, do some research, put it all together, have it evaluated by some stakeholders in the field, such as university professors, teaching translation. And then most recently in May of this past year, we launched the online version. And it seems a lot more, I guess, a lot simpler than it's, but it was really a very daunting task.
Yeah, no doubt.
So we developed about 40 modules that are, I would say 40 units, and each unit is about 3 hours of instructional class time. So it's about 120 hours training.
So everyone who's working for you needs to go through the 120 hours of training? Or
it's not really who's working for us, but any people who are aspiring to be community translators, what we like to call.
And is this free for those people
Yes,
to do?
so absolutely. Thank you for
Okay.
reminding me. Yeah, because it is funded by the Ontario Trillium Foundation, it is free for 500 people. And right now we've trained about 150 to 180, and we have another 150 in training.
Okay.
So we have around 300 out of the 500.
Oh, so people better get in there quick.
Yeah, I
before
mean,
they-
if they're interested.
because
Yeah.
who knows if funding will continue with the new government.
Well,
Scary thing.
yeah, for sure. We
Yeah.
have the funding until March 2019.
2019?
Yes, 2019. So,
So
the end.
not just this year, but the next year as well.
Yeah, 2019, March
that's good.
2019. And then after that, we have to, I guess, start charging for the program. or
Right.
something. Yeah.
So people just have to get in touch with MCISlanguages.com.
Yeah,
get in
absolutely.
there.
They can go on our
Okay.
website, mcislanguages.com. There's a training tab at the top, translator training. They can register for that, and it's absolutely free. Yeah.
Wow. And what are the benefits for people to do this?
Well, one of the benefits I would say is definitely learning more about best practices in the field. We have a lot of students who have some experience in translation or had translation experience from back home, for example. But maybe they're just missing formal training or experience in the Canadian context. So that's what this program provides for them. Then there's those who have no background in translation whatsoever, but have that bilingual
Or trilingual or whatever.
exactly skill. So they're able to harness that and then start learning about translation. So it really caters to, I guess, a wide variety of students, because we also go into how to manage and build your own translation business, which
There's another.
exactly, which a lot of people find is very relevant. Yeah.
Right. For language entrepreneurs. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, that's great. Huh? So that's something that the casual, bilingual, trilingual, quadrilingual speaker in Toronto should think about doing.
Yeah,
perhaps.
should definitely think about it,
There's
especially
200 spaces left. and
Well,
that's it,
yeah, especially if one of the prerequisites is that they have to at least know how to type in their language, which is a lot trickier than it seems.
Right. You
But
need certain
yes,
keyboard.
because translation is written. Long gone are the days of writing out translation, so everything
But you
is
said there's
typed
also
now.
oral translators too. You have both.
So there's interpretation, yeah.
Okay.
So interpreters can do the oral.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I've someone in mind for this, not myself, but
Yeah. Yeah.
that's an interesting thing. Okay. And where would you like to see this go? Like how big, or what's your dream for this organization?
Yeah, so what I'm working on right now with my, I guess, my boss, the director of client services, is trying to get more recognition for the program, which We have in some part gained some recognition from, for example, the Ontario Council for Community Interpreting, and then the University of Strasbourg. We have some partnerships so that our students can, access their programs, or so that the program can be recognized as professional development units,
Nice.
which is very important. So the next step is really trying to get more recognition for the program, which is some of the feedback we've received from students, like, what can I do? But once you receive the training, you do get a certificate of completion, and you're able to work with MCIS as a translator. And what's important to really, I guess, highlight is that you can work as a freelance translator without getting certified, which is what a lot of people are looking for. But that process is very complex, and it's very long, and it's only granted by ATIO, so the Association of Translators and Interpreters of Ontario. However, the program, because it does encompass all of these topics, I believe is a very good course to take if you want to prepare to be certified, because it does cover a lot of best practices and ethical dilemmas that are really relevant for translators.
That's good. And when you got involved in this, what was your background when you first entered?
So when I first started the project, my forte is, I guess, project management. So my responsibility was to really make sure that we developed the program and developed it on time and within budget. So that was, I think, my greatest contribution to it. But I've also developed a lot of the modules, especially on translation project management. I've also been involved in facilitating some of the classes on site. I lead a couple of webinars online as well. And constantly improving the content, etc.
And are you always working in English with the translators, or are you dealing with different languages yourself?
Yeah, so personally, I only translate from Spanish into English. That's my training. I completed a degree at Glendon, so that's York University, translation certificate and translation masters. But
that's a tough course, that one, I've heard.
Yeah, it took me a very, very long time to finish my thesis, but I'm really glad that I did that.
And that course has a reputation. It's been a little bit hard, okay.
But the program itself is language independent or language neutral. So we're taking that idea, the methodology, from our community interpreter training, which actually, the language of instruction is all in English for both programs. And really what it's teaching them is the skills, the strategies, the research tools, the sources of how they can carry out translation into their language.
And so anyone working for you would have to first go through the 120-hour training before they could start freelancing?
So if you're working as a freelancer for us, you don't have to undergo the training if you already have previous training.
But if you don't?
But if you don't, and you really want to work with us as a translator or any other organization, then yes, definitely I would recommend taking the translator training program.
But are you ever looking for people to do it, sort of taking the program as they're also doing the work for you? Does that happen too, or
so?
No?
Because we do have industry standards that we have to follow when carrying out translation services. The translators that we work with have to have a minimum number of years of experience, or have a university degree, or be certified, etc. Which I guess is part of, the way that the industry is set up, right? So it's a little bit difficult if you don't have training, then how can you get the experience? But if you, so it's quite, chicken and the egg kind of situation. But that's why this program is so important, because you can get that experience with the program. So there's a lot of hands-on practical work to get you translating. You do receive feedback from professional translators at the end of the program, so you do get that feedback from someone in order to improve.
Okay, that sounds good. What other things can you let our listeners know about with this program? We've covered quite a bit, but there must be other hidden gems there that we don't know about. Because I had not heard of this program.
Oh, really?
No.
Well, now you do.
Now I have, and I know that, I was just reading in the paper about how many people in Toronto, the percentage who do not speak English or French and need this kind of help, and it's pretty significant, obviously. So are there other competitive groups with you, or?
So
Or is
as
this-
far as I
yeah.
know, we are the first to have a translator training program that's focused on community translation.
Right.
And as of right now, I guess we're just trying to also raise awareness of exactly what you just mentioned, right? That there is a large number of people in the city that need access to these services, and they can't get it unless it's in their language.
Right.
So we're trying to raise awareness of that, and continue to raise awareness of that. And this program is definitely part of that strategy.
Right.
One thing that I do have to say about the program, going into it, I expected to be, I guess, with the rest of the team, kind of sharing and imparting the knowledge that we had.
Right.
But it was a very wonderful, I guess, surprise about all the things that we've learned from our students and their experiences, because many of them, as I mentioned, do have some past translation experience, or they have experience as interpreters. So it's a really great opportunity to learn from them, to constantly improve or update our program as well.
That's great.
And we're also very, very, very fortunate to have a wonderful team of facilitators who are also professional translators, or who have degrees in translation, and who also are certified, and they are also committed to sharing in that knowledge, and they believe in our vision of the need to provide people with access to critical information and services through translation. Yeah.
That's great. So I think we probably covered everything.
Yeah.
I think. And the last thing people can do is just go to
Yes,
this.
yes,
Go
absolutely.
to the website.
They can go to MCISlanguages.com. Then there's the training tab, and definitely sign up before the end of March 2019, so that they
right.
can get a free spot.
Right. Great. Okay. And how about just on the flip side, the clients, the people looking for that? How do they have to get in touch with you, or are they getting through different
Yeah,
organizations?
so if there are any clients that need translation, interpretation, or training services, they can definitely contact us. Again, MCISlanguages.com. They can request a quote for any services, and then we'll respond within 24 hours.
Okay. And you guys are very busy.
Yes, but we always respond within 24 hours.
Okay.
It's one of our
That's
biggest.
good. That's the motto. We
yes.
respond in 24 hours, or our
Yes.
service is free. Okay. No, you didn't say that. Okay. Great. And you're located just across from the Science Center,
Yes,
as you said?
so yeah, we're at Don Mills and Eglinton, right in the middle, smack dab in the middle of construction, but
Oh,
we're there.
You're there.
Yeah.
Everyone's suffering with this
Yeah.
Eglinton. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So there it is, people. We know about it now. Thank you very much, Gabriela,
Thank
for
you
coming
so
in.
much for having me.
That's great. So I hope the organization keeps its funding.
Yes.
Maybe the federal government can step in.
Well,
That would be
fingers
good.
crossed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of tax dollars out there to access, so let's hope so. Sounds like a useful thing, and definitely in this city we need this. So
Yes,
this
we
is
do.
great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.